And now we're going to go over to our studio discussion with the people that actually read them or don't read them. Are there people here who actually do buy newspapers, say because you don't like the ones your parents read?
Yeah.
Yeah, OK.
My parents read the Daily Mail, and I read the Guardian.
Why?
Basically.
What's the difference
It's
between
pretty
the two?
self-explanatory. Well, the Daily Mail is... Well, the Guardian isn't very good for young people, but I find it's the only paper with any integrity, really.
What do you mean by a newspaper having integrity?
Well, I trust what I read in the Guardian more than I would in the Daily Mail.
Why?
Well, the Daily Mail, I find I have to filter it first and decide what's true myself before I take any in.
Are you talking about the quality of their reporting or their political bias?
Well, I think it's very politically biased, yeah.
Right, straight over here.
I think young people would be more interested in reading something if it's presented well. I think that if you look at the Times or something, you sort of stagger at it, by the size of the newsprint. Whereas if you look at sort of a glossy colour magazine, you're much more liable to sort of pick it up and read through it.
Right, can we come straight over, get the things over? Right.
It all depends if you want sensationalism, because you read one of the Sun or the Daily Mirror, and they have about 5 foot of headlines. Then they have one line to describe what they're saying up above. Yeah. I mean, The Guardian or one of the other more educated papers, supposedly, you have more explanation and a less biased view.
Yeah.
Well, I think, personally, reading something like The Sun or Daily Star or something is like reading a comic magazine. I mean, you just read it and you think, gosh, I know who wrote that? You know, chuck it away and pick up the one that will sort of give you a different view. But if you read several views, you can take your own, make up your own mind about it.
That's a thing that we're always told to do as intelligent young people, is read several newspapers. Is there anybody here who actually does do that positively, take a couple of copies of different newspapers and compare them? Anybody bother to do that?
Well, yes, if your parents buy a Tory biased paper and you don't like it, you can buy a Guardian and you can see which is true. You usually find the truth mainly from what's on TV, or you try and believe it because it's fact and you can see what's happening.
You believe the television is fact?
No, you don't, but you tend to more.
You tend to.
And you can find out.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that people continually suspect the press of not being quite true?
When they're owned by, they've got proprietors who are millionaires and they've got their own interests. Yeah. And they're either feeling they want an ego trip by owning a paper, what fun, or they're either trying to make people vote Tory.
Yeah. This would be a good point to go to one of our guests this afternoon, Anthony Howard, who is broadcaster and journalist. Perhaps could you tell us something about the establishment of newspapers and the ownership and how that comes into play with what people write?
Yeah, it's the most old-fashioned establishment in the whole of the United Kingdom. If you, your dad owns, let's say, GEC or ICI, it doesn't dream to occur to you that you will get his job just because you're your father's son. In newspapers, that tends to happen, and has happened, from generation to generation. They want to be personal, but if you ask why Lord Rothermere controls the Daily Mail, the answer is because his father controlled it, and the answer about his father is because his father controlled it. And that pattern doesn't get repeated anywhere else in British industry. And so I think you're absolutely right over there that there is a difference about newspapers, and newspapers are rich men's playthings. I'd just say one word in favour of the old proprietors that you mentioned. They at least cared about newspapers. The trouble today is that a lot of people who are taking over newspapers basically care about making money. They basically might just as well be running a car plug factory or a cornflakes factory, and they happen to put their money into newspapers. Yeah, and this is very serious, because you see, if you get a newspaper owner who owns a lot of North Sea oil, you're not going to see much criticism of the way North Sea oil is got out of the sea, or you may see criticism of the government tax, but he's going to actually abide by what his interests are. This has amounted, in my view, to a new form of censorship on the press, and a form of censorship that didn't exist at the time that Beaverbrook and Rothermere, who were, if you like, bold buccaneers, warrior press barons, they actually cared about their papers and only their papers. Now it's got much more complicated.
Is there anybody who wants to come back on anything from there?
None of the major multinational papers support the Labour Party.
Well, the Mirror wouldn't like to hear you say that. No. The Mirror would say that it does support the Labour Party.
But it's the only one?
It's the only one, really, in the mass circulation field. Although there is one owned, oddly enough. This shows that, if you like, the new thing that's happened, that there's one press proprietor, Mr. Victor Matthews of Trafalgar House, and he runs one absolutely rabid Tory paper, the Daily Express, and one slightly mild Labour paper, the Daily Star. Well, that wouldn't have happened in the old days. I mean, now it's become such a business to make money and to go out and find where the voters are. He decided when he started the Daily Star that it wasn't doing very well in supporting the Conservative Party, because a lot of its circulation was up in the northeast and the northwest, and so he changed it into a Labour paper. But that doesn't mean he's a conviction press proprietor. And if you ask me whether I prefer the old system or the new one, I think the old system was more honest.
Perhaps we could try and get to the more disestablished press, the music press and the teenage papers. I mean, how many people here actually buy a music paper every week? I mean, that's a lot. That's half the studio. But what about the rest? I mean, why don't you go for music papers? Yeah.
I gave up buying it because it was too obscure. I was reading the NME. I sort of got the NME for about a year. I've got a big pile of them in my bedroom, and they're just too obscure.
OK, can we go in the middle then?
It's quite often difficult to suss out what the music papers are trying to say. I'll try and read them thoroughly. But in the end, I'm only interested in the news. I mean, who's on tour, who's doing what, who's doing this. When they interview a band, they go so... Well, I suppose they think they're going deep, that they manage to confuse everybody. There's just nothing in it. They talk more about the furnishings of the room that they're interviewing the band in.
How much they had to drink at the bar?
Oh yeah, how much they're paying. Oh, what rat's wearing today, and rat gobbed on the floor. Something stupid, and there's nothing in it at all.
OK.
Basically, what it's got down to with the music press, I think, is the people are on a ultimate ego trip, and they've got a little clique of people who you sometimes read about that they've seen at the gigs, and really they got the power in their hands to make or break a group.
Perhaps we could go over to Mike McIver. I got your name right, didn't I? Robert. I knew I got it wrong. It's because we had a mic on the film. That's why I haven't spoken to you for such a long time, because I couldn't remember your name. In the studio this afternoon we have Robert McIver. You're editing a new magazine for young people. Now, how do you see your market here gathered this afternoon, and how are you going to get these people to read your new publication?
Well, I think what's very interesting is that a programme like this treats, if you like, young people, teenagers, with a sense of seriousness, that these people actually do, like older people, if you like, adults, have points of view, and that these views should be taken seriously. So this sort of magazine will try to achieve that, but what's more important, I think, of the lot, is that it's going to ask young readers to write in to articles, information, drawings, illustrations, photography, and that if we consider that it's okay, we'll actually publish it and put your name to it and pay you for it. Because if it's good enough to go in the magazine and you've done it, then you're good enough to get paid for it.
Well, there are. You've heard a tremendous advert there for a new publication. Now, do you believe him? Do you want it anyway? Doesn't matter whether you buy it or not. Let's have some comeback on that.
I think every publication tries to buy you, like, you know, to write in and all that, but that's the first I've ever heard of saying, like, we'll pay you.
This gentleman was saying about writing in, about covering pop, covering music and all the rest of it. It's all been done. I remember when Oh Boy and some of the picture magazines came out for girls, they all said, right, we're going to tell you this, we're going to tell you that, we're going to have a pop page, we're going to have a quiz page, we're going to have a write in, tell us what your boyfriend's done to you page. They've done it all, and you get £2 for the star letter and everything, but they gradually go downhill, and within sort of 6 or 8 months, they've slid into the back row with all the rest of the magazines.
Yeah. Can we come back over to Anthony Howard and ask him why he thinks that there is a need for all these young people's magazines? Why do the established press fail in appealing to everybody like they say they do?
Well, they do. I mean, they obviously do fail, even our editors at the beginning, or no, the guy from the New Standard, he admitted that. I thought he was very good. He said, you know, look around this office, there's no one here. They're all middle-aged, he said. They toddle off to the police courts and write about punks. I think it's true, and I think most editors in Fleet Street are aware of that. They're very keen, by the way, to get you as a market, because the idea, rather like the Jesuits, you know, if you get them young enough, you keep them for life. And a paper like The Guardian, which has come out of this pretty well up to now, has made a dead set at getting young students. I mean, all sorts of concession offers and all the rest of it. It really has said that's our market. We go out and after them and get them. But I think the difficulty is, you know, a paper does tend to reflect those who work on its staff and those who are its editor. And if you get to my age, which is over 45, you tend not to know an awful lot about what people 20 years or 30 years younger than you are thinking. It may well be that Fleet Street has to think very seriously about this, and it may be that there should be positive discrimination in favour of hiring the young. And this, I think, has caused a problem, and that Fleet Street is rather getting a bit ossified.
Howard says this, and he says, well, I think we ought to get young journalists in there. But if you got sacked for some unknown reason, and there was, you knew a young journalist, and you knew he was very good, and you knew he was with it, and he was going for the job, the same job that you was going, would you turn the screws and, you know, say, oh, well, you know, I'm an experienced man, you don't want these young, you know, you don't want these youngsters in there. I mean, you sound very sincere to us, but are you?
Well, it's a hard question. I think if I was put in that position, I'd probably come the old soldier as fast as anyone and say, you know, well, it's knowledge that counts and all the rest of it. But in principle, I do actually believe what I said. And when I was editing another paper, The Statesman, I had a absolute deliberate policy to have people working for me who are under 25. It's the national newspapers that are the ones who really say, no, we don't want to look at you until you've cut your teeth, or some kind of phrase like that. We don't want any young cubs around here. There are ways of getting around it, but I happen to think, and I blame the union as well, let me be clear about this, I think that the NUJ, National Union of Journalists, when it said, no one shall come through this portcullis until we have decided that he is a properly qualified professional journalist because he's done his training in the provinces, they did something there to stifle talent and also to shut off Fleet Street papers, national newspapers, from the younger generation.
Right, OK, to round up, what do you want to say to all the old hacks who are sitting home at the moment with their feet up in front of the television? What would you... You've got the chance now. What do you want to actually say right in their lap now? Come on, let's have a load of them.
I think they should only write about youth cultures, music and such like, if they're actually there seeing it. Our local paper, especially the music section, they write about it and they weren't there. I know for a fact that the journalist wasn't there. It's all second-hand knowledge. They ought to be there.
OK, can we just go there?
Yeah, when he was talking about like the gigs and all that, I think that like when they do go to the gigs to write something about a gig that like's local or something, they should get the people that are there to write about them. Like they should pick someone who's been there, you know, who's there. They should go, you know, do you want to write about this gig? Do you want to say something about it, whether it was good, whether it was bad, whether the band, you know, really got into the crowd and all that, instead of writing their own story because like they're not really into that if they're old.
OK, there too.
If I had to say one thing to newspaper editors, I'd say they need a stronger code of ethics and less sensation. I think more people would appreciate that, especially of our age group.
Yeah, but people buy them, don't they? They still buy them because of the sensationalism.
But they have too much. They seem to impose themselves on people's private lives.
People are interested. I don't know why, but they love to read about gossip. You know, their idols. They love to know.
Well, it doesn't make it
who
right.
they're jumping into bed with and all things like that.
No, it doesn't make it right, though, does it?
No, I'm not saying it is right.
Right, finally, sorry, but we have got to the end of this debate now. Anthony Howard, could we just ask you just to say one final thing, that your profession has been slighted terribly here this afternoon, your code of ethics, your method of presentation, your obscurity, your age. How this is your last chance to defend your profession.
Well, I don't think the Messenger is ever very popular. He's never been a popular figure in, you know, drama and all the rest of it. He brings news people don't like, so he always gets ends up by sort of being sent away with his head cut off. But no journalist is under any illusion that journalism is not a respected profession or trade, as I think it is. It's not like being a doctor, it's not even like being a school teacher. And perhaps they are, in a sense, you know, we do feed off other people's lives, and you can't expect to have popularity if you're really the person who's standing around and saying, I'm taking that down and using it in evidence against you and putting it in a paper. We're not a popular profession. I think less popular in this country now than perhaps we were 10, 20 years ago. Maybe it's our fault. But on the other hand, the great classic defence is, and I must end on this, that it's no good really blaming the papers. The fact is that the papers that you have been slating, papers that you say are sensationalist and all the rest of it, they sell to 3.8, 3.7 million people. And that's where I think the journalist at the end of the day rather hypocritically says, don't blame the mirror, look at the face.
Thanks very much, Anthony Howard of The Observer. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this week.